Hi, and welcome to our podcast, The Sun, the Moon, and the Truth. I'm Natalie Backman, and I'm co hosting today with my partner, Karina. And we have two amazing guests to join us for our conversation today about community, and specifically about spiritual community and community within the yoga culture. We've got a lot of interesting perspectives to explore. And I just want to remind anyone who's watching or listening that our approach to these conversations is intentionally a little bit messy and not really all that invested in being able to tie things up with a nice, neat ribbon. So there might be more questions at the end of this conversation than there are answers, and we like it that way. So I'm going to take a moment just to talk a little bit about sort of the framework of this conversation of spiritual community, and then Karina will introduce you to our guests and we'll get started. So one of my favorite words is Sangha, and it's a Sanskrit term, and it essentially translates to, I'm going to read this definition because I think it's really charming and beautiful. A Sangha is a community of friends practicing Dharma together. The essence of a Sangha is awareness, understanding, acceptance, harmony, and love. When you do not see these in a community, it is not a true Sangha, and you should have the courage to say so. But when you find these elements are present in a community, you know that you have the happiness and fortune of being in a real Sangha. So at least in my world, that's the ideal. And so I'm really curious to see, what else comes up with these conversations. And from there, I think I'm going to turn it over to you, Karina.
Awesome. That was such a beautiful definition. It gave me all the feelings. So for this conversation, I'm really excited to introduce two just genuinely beautiful humans. Chrissie Chung, who is a yoga teacher from the UK, and Seba Khanna from Egypt. Both Seba and Chrissie are established yoga teachers. I love them both because I think what they have in common is two very sharp minds, but also two very tender hearts, which I think is just the perfect combination. And I think one of the reasons that we felt really drawn to having you both on board for this chat is because I don't know, I kind of think of you both as these thinkers of deep thoughts and ponderers of the world. And so I'm really excited to be in conversation with you both. For those of you who are listening, if you are curious about Seba and Chrissie and you want to look them up after this, I'll pop their details below the video so you can. So I thought we could start with, start with the personal before we move to the collective. And the first question actually I realize is kind of a personal one actually, but we can just go there straight from the beginning. And so the first question is, and maybe I'll throw this to you, Chrissie, is before we even talk about, community structure or the ideals around community or anything like that, what is your relationship with, or what comes to mind when I ask you about your experience of belonging?
I love that question. In a broad sense, belonging for me is when I feel at home in myself, in whatever aspect that is afforded, whether it's how I feel comfortable in myself, but also how I'm embraced either by the world around me, the people around me. And it's being in a situation where you're afforded that opportunity to remember you're whole, you're perfect as you are. There's nothing you need to search for or do, which inevitably, at least in my experience, enables me to offer more of myself to this life, to the experiences around me. And so that for it really is me in a nutshell, when I feel at home in myself, and so I can bring the best of myself out.
What about you, Seba?
When I think of community, I think of like the dynamics between people, and I feel like when people come together, the boundaries become blurred, and then personal claims also kind of wither away into nothingness. And I think that's really powerful, because it's so easy to claim things like power and status and all these kinds of things. And community for me is the opposite of that. It's like kind of like, because we grow together anyway. I mean, my success is yours as well, and so it's really unique to experience that. Honestly, I feel that feeling of like, it's not my success, it's not my whatever it is that is developing within me. And I think like you said, Natalie, it's fortunate. It really is. It feels like luck, when you find a situation like that.
Yeah, I agree.
So then, our opinions of anything are shaped by the experiences that we've had as we've, traveled along the road. So I wonder if, and I'll throw this open to all three of you, if you have any pivotal memories or formative experiences around community that have or currently shape your opinion of or relationship with the idea of community. Nat, what about you first?
Yeah, it's such an interesting, multidimensional relationship that I have with community. I have been fortunate to be a part of a lot of communities over my life, but not all of them, or maybe even any of them prior to yoga at least, felt unconditional. None of them felt like I could be fully me and only me and still be like fully accepted. So it always felt like I had to compromise in some way, either make myself fit into a specific mold or adopt a specific belief system. And as soon as I was no longer willing to do that, then I was no longer a welcome part of that community. And so it's one of those things that's like one of my heart's deepest desires is to be in a genuine Sangha, like to really have that heart deep connection where I get to be, as Chrissie was saying, all of who I am. And I get to be fully at home with myself and then provide that opportunity equally to everyone else that's in that community. For me, I've got so many like samskaras around that moment of realizing I didn't belong and then having to take like a really firm stand and extricate myself from a community, and just how painful that is. But at the same time, how it like builds up courage and builds up the determination to like stay the course until I do find or am able to cultivate something that I really want to belong to. So one example I can give is I grew up Christian, and my parents split up when I was 14, and when that happened, then I became like extra desperate for community and extra desperate for some sense of belonging that could provide me with a sense of direction as well. And so like the stricter the better was kind of my thing at that point. But like I could have gone either super rebellious or like super, straight and narrow, and I went the straight and narrow. And it worked fairly well for a while, but there was always a little bit of a friction of trying to subscribe to a specific belief system, but it always feeling like round peg, square hole kind of a thing. And then it was right after 9/11 happened in the US, when the church that I was going to at the time got very preachy about God bless America and anti-Islam. And I remember at that moment just all of that fire and clenching in my belly just becoming like more than I could handle. And so I stood up in the middle of a service and just like looked at the pastor with, like laser beam eyes. And I just like did one of those, huffy 22, 2021, something like that, however old I was at the time. And just like, I had enough of this and like stormed out in the middle of a church service. And that it felt powerful in the moment, but also was like so heartbreaking to know that, I've invested all of these years and all of this energy in trying to fit and trying to belong, and then tearing myself out of that and just feeling that emptiness that kind of comes with being the outsider. And it's happened a few times. And so I found myself almost 30, and just one of the biggest longings for me 10 years after that extrication was to find like minds and to find people that I could be fully myself with and form that kind of special community. So long story, but there you go.
Seba, what about you?
I was thinking about like community in my life, and something came to mind that is actually maybe not formally classified as community, but I was thinking about like retreats. I feel like on retreats, people just like, it's the fastest thing. It's like within a few days, people are like, there's this kind of like meshing, like everyone just blends into one thing. And I was wondering, like, why does that happen on retreats? I mean, like, obviously people are a little bit more relaxed and things like that. And like the whatever practices they're practicing, help. But I thought of it, and I feel like as a teacher, what I experience when people are on retreat is a lot more present. The readiness is there, and so I feel like they step up, and so I step up, and then it just becomes growth, because I wouldn't say I challenge them more, but like you're able to really call upon that potential within them to receive, and so they receive much more and you give much more, and that really just creates this like beautiful harmony of you growing in your own space and them as well, and then it just becomes a shared experience. And I think that shared experience is a huge catalyst for community, and I feel like maybe that's a no-brainer, but really it is, because there are certain things that you experience in your life where you just can't talk about, and you have no words, and you wonder if there are words, and and I think that's really special. But then I started thinking, so how do we recreate this? How do we recreate this kind of stuff in long-term situations? And I don't know. I wonder if you have ideas, but yeah, I think that would be beautiful.
It's
just
so
kind of
interesting.
like dropping in.
It's so interesting that you say that, because I feel the same way about teacher trainings, that there's something about that container and the presence, like you say, Seba, that everybody brings to that experience, and also the intention to transform through that experience, the willingness to do that, and the willingness to hold others and be held also in this collective experience of transformation. And there's something about that as well that just kind of drops people into a kind of connection that I've also not seen in other places. And I've also wondered about how you can create that long term in a different setting, because I've heard so many people talk about that on teacher training. Like, I've had this experience and I understand what's possible now, and now I'm going back to my real life and I don't know how to recreate that there. I think it's such a fascinating question. Which might actually be a good segue into a question that I've got for you, Chrissie, which is, I think when we come to a conversation like this to talk about community, in my mind anyway, I immediately go to my ideals around community and how do we make a reality or a lived experience fit an ideal of an experience. And so I wonder, Chrissie, do you have any ideals around community that would consciously come to mind? But also, what's the flip side of that? If you have ideals around community, do you have fears or judgments around community as well? Like, what do both ends of the spectrum look like for you?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I do have ideals. I hold them in firm regard, but also loosely to make room for life. Like you said, so you don't lean into that sticky aspect of judgment, which we can do so easily. And I think that that's one of the key pieces of community, is that you can embrace differences, to step away from that sense of right or wrongness. Seba mentioned something earlier about whatever we're doing within that, it's shared, and I think for me, community speaks to compassion and kindness and patience. And there are all these qualities that allow you to feel held and allow you to also remain open and curious, to lean into the side of this possibility that maybe we don't always have the answers and someone different can teach us something new. And if we can all show up in that way, then we do continue to feel held. Where I've seen communities fall apart is where we get that sense of separateness, where suddenly we do have to feel like I don't belong anymore because my ideals can't really match to that. And the spaces where I've seen communities work is where there's just always this embrace, always this acceptance. Some of my favorite teachers can answer any question from any person, and even if they're guiding them towards a specific teaching, that person is embraced. They're never wrong. And I think that's so important. So those are the things I think that are my biggest ideals. How can I embrace and also vulnerability? And I, thinking about this, how can we bring those qualities of a retreat or trainings back out into world? I think sometimes where we hit the walls is that we're so guarded in this normal life, where certain conversations are too sticky or taboo, and for some reason in the retreat or the training, it's like we allow the messiness of life to be seen. And I think if we could bring more of that into normal life, then maybe we could have those conversations where people would just be so much more willing to open. My experiences of teaching, the moments that I'm willing to open and be vulnerable and raw, people in front of me will open too. And you start to realize that, especially in those experiences where you perhaps have the most fear of being seen or judged, that again, they're shared. And the more we can realize how much of our human condition is shared, the more we perhaps soften into a community that could just be held.
Seba, I wanted to ask you the same question before I hand over to Nat. Ideals and also maybe fears or judgments around community. I have this sense of you as being somebody who thinks about this issue at the moment, and that could just totally be my projection of you. I don't know if that's the case or not, but this is actually a question that I've wanted to ask you for ages.
It's quite accurate. Honestly, I think one of the things the community gift, and I think is in my ideal definition of community, is that it needs to trigger you somehow. And and I know that maybe not like doesn't sound nice, you know, it doesn't sound like it's appealing or anything, but it really does, you know. And I think so. I'm part of a Sufi group, and that's one of the kind of like precepts that like we are in community, and you are in community because you always learn through, I mean, through your projections on other people and how people mirror yourself back to you through them just being themselves. And I think that's so important because you learn so much, and it's constantly like constantly knocking at your door saying, you know what, you this is an opportunity for growth here, you know, you just like this annoying person and this person who's late and loud and you know, and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's really, really a huge gift. And I've seen it in my own life, you know, some of the people who were the most annoying, you know, are now friends and dear friends, you know, even. So I think, I mean, I agree for sure that community is like home base, you know. It really can be, but it also needs to kind of, there has to be friction, and I think that's one of its services to us. And in terms of something, I think, I mean, like I feel community goes wrong a little when there's dogma, you know, when it's like a right way and a wrong way and all of that stuff. And I feel like I don't really need to elaborate very much, but you know what I mean. You know, when it's just like you were saying, Chrissie, you know, it's just this kind of like you're outside somehow, you know, and that's awful. I think it's awful because it feels like there's no space to breathe, and there's no room to grow in your own way, and to just because like when you are held, I think you become more eccentric, you know, you become more unique. Yeah, and so when there's no room for that, then like what are we even doing here? We're just reaffirming things that are already established, you know. So it's kind of redundant in my eyes, you know. So, yeah.
Yeah. And that feels like a really good segue into the next question, which is like, what's the difference between genuine community and this sort of contemporary idea of tribalism? So, not tribalism as in like genuine tribes of indigenous peoples, but this sort of like my vibe attracts my tribe kind of a thing where we're all, you know, part of a group because we do subscribe to a certain way of life or a certain belief system or whatnot. And like what is the difference there? And Seba, I feel like you were just already starting to like tap into that of like dogma, the role that dogma plays in how some communities are created, and you know, whether that's productive or not, and the room for growth and the room for eccentricities and whatnot. So I'd love to just sort of pose that as, what are some of those differences that we see between genuine community and, you know, being part of the tribe. So Chrissie, I'll go ahead and start with you, and then Seba will come back and see if there's anything else you want to add to that.
So from my own experience as well, like I've been part of something that really felt like community, and it's not to say that that isn't there, but I think the sense of like unconditional community and tribe, at least for me, the difference lies in again this idea of dogma, or you can only belong if XYZ, and then you're part of the tribe. Mm-hmm. And you know, the minute that happens, it will inspire people, especially, you know, if you are feeling lost and that desire for belonging is strong, it can feel like you're so held, and it gives structure. But I think the potential for downfall is that in that given moment where suddenly something doesn't sit right with you, and so it doesn't give room for the eccentricities or the differences, or the fact that you can be triggered and know that in the trigger you'll still be held by the community. Then when it's taken away is that feeling of, who am I? And, you know, I've seen the people who do feel like they belong harder. And there is this separation, we're right, you're wrong. And the ones who feel almost let down to a degree are lost. And, you know, especially let's say in the yoga world where you feel like you belong to a lineage, suddenly that's taken away from you. the detriment that it can bring to your own personal practice that has afforded you so much expansion and growth is suddenly something they don't want to be a part of. I think it can, just as much as it can build, it can then create damage. Whereas, if there's real sense of community, it will stand the test of time. It will be unconditional in its acceptance, in its love, and it will be able to hold you in the messiness of life, in those moments you feel challenged or discomfort, and you will continue to feel like you belong. And I think that for me is the real difference between real community, where anyone can be a part of that, and tribe, where it can last for a certain amount of time until the XYZ maybe doesn't fit anymore.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, who determines the XYZ? Who makes the rules in these more dogmatic communities? And, is it reliant upon a charismatic individual that a community is then built up around? Or is it like a group of people who determine, like, this is what is required for belonging? And does that feel like community, or does it feel like tribalism? Or I don't have an answer. It's just something maybe curious to add to the conversation. Yeah. Seba, do you have any thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think to be clear, I think systems are actually very useful. I mean, when I said dogma, I just wanted to clarify that I didn't mean that systems aren't, or are a problem, because they are amazing, really. I mean, like, it's sometimes very comforting to be, to learn, or to dive deep into something where people have gone to great lengths to really, kind of just figure every little thing out, that makes sense in their perspective or in their worldview. But I'm just wondering if it's necessary for community to flourish. I mean, like, and maybe this is actually just a question: is it necessary for a healthy community to be based on a system, such as a religion or a lineage in yoga or something like that, or can it go deep and be nourishing and healing and space for growth if it's something like a sport or something like that, or you know what I mean, like a book club or something. Not that I'm belittling those things. Those things are lovely.
Yeah, it brings to mind to me like a working understanding of Stiram Sukhamasana, which is this idea, like the way that I sort of translated in my head is, from structure comes freedom. Like, when we have systems in place, or when there is a certain amount of structure, then that provides that container that Karina was referencing, like the container of a training, or the container of a retreat or something, where there is something that is holding you as an individual, but then also holding you potentially together as a collective. And then within that structure, you have room to kind of see what fits and push against it a little bit, or rest in it. So that's an interesting aspect of it as well, is like there is a lot of beauty and a lot of comfort that can come from those systems, or from a structure, from a lineage, for example, in terms of like yoga, of knowing that people have gone before where you're attempting to go, and are leaving behind, step-by-step instructions of how to get there. And then is it possible that you can follow those instructions, but along the way, like, dance them rather than march them, exactly the way the person before you did? And is there room for that give and take of, like, just enough structure balanced with just enough ease within the context of community? Karina, do you have anything you want to add to that aspect of the conversation?
I feel like I have more questions. So I'll just jumble through a bunch of half thoughts in my head, and if it gets too convoluted, I'll hand it back to you. I feel like it's interesting because so often, and I think this speaks to what you were saying, Seba, so often when it comes to our quest for a sense of belonging, what we're searching for is to have our own values reflected back to us by the community that we seek to be a part of, if we're thinking about belonging in relation to other people rather than in relation to ourselves. And there's something that can be very nourishing about the experience of having, those values reflected back. I often think about, though, how do you strike a balance between, and I think I've spoken about this before, like shared understanding rather than consensus, because I think what happens in a community often is you come together around a set of values or beliefs or whatever it is, and then you almost sort of tighten or create structure around them. And then, as tends to be the way with humans, it goes from a like, oh my gosh, me too, to a like, oh goodness, how could they think that? And so then the focus ends up becoming like an us and them thing rather than like a yes and thing. And, I think about that if we sort of expand the conversation beyond yoga, there's a lot of sort of community that we see reflected to us in politics and all of that kind of thing, that's more about like a shared disagreement with something else than it is around sort of an affirmation of a particular way of life or something like that. So I guess it's just sort of a roundabout way of saying, like, structure is important and some sense of sameness is important within that structure, but also chaos is important and some sense of difference and friction and challenge is important as well, because if all you're seeking is sameness, then all you get in the end, I think, is stagnation. And I think what you do need is the friction of growth, so that a community or a belief system or a way of life or something like that can constantly evolve. Like if a community becomes a closed structure that's about sort of the defense of something, then I don't think that's helpful. If it can remain an open structure that everybody can expand into, then I think that that's the ideal for me.
Yeah, it's interesting that what you touched on there, of like one of the most uniting forces in our current world is like uniting around a common enemy. And like that immediate like us and them situation, then you belong with this group because you're all, collectively against that other group. And how, yeah, that's fascinating and scary to me. Potentially quite dangerous. Yeah, it's interesting.
What's interesting actually that just sprung to mind was I heard a teacher talk recently about how, it's so easy to defend values or, whatever it is. And we think that that's what the challenge is or what the battle is. But to bring it back to the yoga conversation, what she was saying is that, what the battle is or the challenge is in the end is to rise above all of that, to see that we're not actually in the business of defending one value system or another, but recognizing that all value systems are prakriti or shakti or whatever, and that what we're aiming for is to affirm the awareness beyond all of the difference.
Yeah. I just had a memory of something that it's a little bit embarrassing. Well, particularly as once I joined the Himalayan tradition, when I started practicing para yoga, I started getting a little bit high and mighty, well, the way that we practice yoga in this tradition, and bringing that back into my community, which is a little bit more oriented toward like power yoga, vinyasa with loud music, and that was my world for a very long time, and I loved it. But now, all of a sudden I was coming back from these trainings and just like, really on my high horse. And well, we practice yoga this way and they practice yoga that way. And I don't think I wasn't quite that dramatic about it, but I was still planting those little seeds of division. And in the fall, we were practicing outside with some of my students, and there was a group of people practicing yoga just like on the other side of the park. And they were practicing like a very physical workout kind of yoga with music, and it was, very peppy and whatnot. And then here we were, doing our tantra katha, and and one of my students made a comment about like how our yoga was better than their yoga, and I just got this like stab in my stomach, and I was like, I created that. Like, I know that I have to take responsibility for that. And so I tried in the moment to like have, a compassionate conversation around it's like one is not inherently better than the other. They're just different approaches, and there's a different end result, and you're here because this happens to work well for you. They're there because that happens to work well for them. It's not a which one of us is better kind of a thing. But in the meantime, I had to really like reckon with myself of I fed that. Like I planted that seed and I fed that sense of division and that sense of what we're doing is better than what they're doing. And it was a big one of those like moments. But I think it's big time out there in yoga just like it is anywhere else, because human beings are involved and there is that sense of us and them, and trying to establish a hierarchy of sorts. Or I just had to confess. Do with it what you will.
I had a thought. I mean, like when you said that, I was thinking like I feel like you're actually this is an introvert speaking here. I feel like you're actually alone, like you even within your community, and I think it's important to remember that. I mean, it does maybe sound a little, yeah, I mean, not unpleasant or something, but you essentially are alone in my worldview in your life, and it's important to remember that when you're in community to that it's still about your personal journey, because I mean that's what you have, and that's what you've been given, and when you remember that, you can be in remembrance like of choosing, you're choosing constantly to be in this, and because it is in resonance with what you need and what makes sense to you, and what's right, and and your values, and I think like that union with your own self contributes to the community, and then to whatever the community is striving for. But yeah, I feel like that's important to me, to just remember that it's still about my journey somehow, even though you can get swept away in the togetherness, and it's really nice and everything, but yeah, it's that's a centering thought for me.
I think you touch on something really important there, because when you show up for community in that respect, it's not from a sense of lack, but from a sense of feeling so whole that I want to offer myself to these people who are also offering themselves. And then there's not the grasping or the clinging to need to belong, but just showing up for people around you that you appreciate and you can see the inherent goodness in, and that you feel grateful to interact with in life. And so whilst, yeah, it might sound depressing, like it's good to be alone, but actually it's not. And I think we have to start embracing that more and realizing that it's such a powerful thing to sit by yourself and feel okay, because we're so busy in life and we're so distracted and in a rush of things that actually that is a really powerful tool that I think then will also give you a clearer and more inspired kind of decision about what community feels like and what you move towards. So that really resonated with me.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard Yoga Rupa say something along the lines of like, Sangha is great, but you have to remember that like the final stages of practice, you have to do it alone. And so if you're super dependent on your community, holding you up through the entire process, then you're not going to make it to the final stages of the experience and the practice, because you have to do that part alone. So if there's a way to be in community which like genuinely nurtures each individual and and fully encourages each individual to be fully themselves, and everyone is alone and yet still compelled to be a part of something greater than the whole. So there's this simultaneous, it's a little bit like the two aspects of the soul, where there's the Jivatman, which is the individuated aspect of the soul, and then Paramatman, which is all of us together, and how these, twin flames kind of dance together that through our entire lives, and then at the very end, as a solo journey, you finally, merge with the whole. There's got to be some way of living that in community where we're nurturing ourselves and one another as independent entities, but then also, creating opportunity to come together and to dance and reflect and support each other. I don't know, how does that land with you, Seba?
I was thinking of, I think it was Mother Teresa who said, you want to change the world, go home and love your family. As in, like, you can sit in meditation and do all this stuff, but then you need to just be with people and be triggered and just remember, all the things that you learned in your meditation space or your cave or whatever, like you need to put that into practice. It's just the way of the world, I feel, it's kind of like almost choiceless, and again, this is from an introvert. Meaning, just what I mean by that is, as in, I recharge alone. I mean, I love community and I love being around people, but I do need my alone time and my silence, and so, yeah. and so I feel like, yeah, that's it's just the way it is, you just have to, like, you will always have a preference, and you just need to explore the other side of the spectrum at some point in your life in order to grow.
Yeah, how interesting that it's a group of 4 introverts that are coming together to discuss community. That's really fascinating in and of itself.
I'll sort of pose this question in 2 parts. The main question is, if you think about experiences of community that you've had, have you seen community done well, and what makes you feel in that instance that it was? And where it kind of links to what we've been talking about is, when I thought about that, I found it really hard to come up with any examples of community done well. And I say that also as another sort of card-carrying introvert who frankly wasn't that interested in community for a really long time. It was sort of like this weird thing that I looked at that I didn't quite understand, and watched with a sense of slight suspicion and curiosity. But, so it could be that, I haven't seen a lot of experiences of community done well because I haven't really been seeking them. But then I also wondered whether, I come from sort of like Western individualistic societies that really privilege the pursuit of individuality and individual success above responsibility to the collective. And I wondered maybe if that was why I hadn't seen community done well, because it's not something that we would collectively seek to foster or cultivate if we're really ensconced in that mentality. So a long-winded way of saying, have you seen examples of community that you thought were really awesome? Why was that? And if not, why do you think that is the case? Chrissie.
So the minute you said it, I was trying to think. I was like, have I? And it's not that I haven't seen great community, but if we're thinking of done well in a sense of it ticking all those boxes, it's been hard. There have been experiences where I thought it might be that, and then just human condition happens, and that separateness starts to occur. And then on the other side of that, so I mean, I grown up, spent most of my life in England, but I was born in Hong Kong, and I have Chinese family. And so they are very much big on community. Everyone is auntie and uncle. But I still didn't see it done in a way that perhaps was perfect. Like I think there are beautiful nuances and qualities to kind of both sides of things. So family are there and they mean everything, but they're also very, 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 very interwoven into life in a way that sometimes guilt tripping is done. And so strong sense of community and that everyone's involved, but sometimes involved in a way where they're trying to control you. And so, I mean, in my experience, I think the best feeling of community I've seen is probably through Yoga Rupa and Para Yoga. His capacity to just embrace everything and everyone has been really amazing. And I know I remember hearing him speak on this idea of creating a sanctuary for everyone to be held. And so he does step away from, even step away, like he can speak to politics, but in a way that's so balanced and calm and kind of seeking to provide the best wisdom for people to feel held or to become the best of themselves. And so that for me so far has been such a wonderful sense of community. And then recently there's been things like this and just collectives of women coming together again have been really beautiful, just to kind of hold each other and to seek out those unique capacities and to bring out the best of themselves and to allow them to just be exactly who they are and to not have to shy away from any parts of themselves. So that's it so far.
I think that's actually really interesting, this reference to, communities of women coming together. Because I think in my recent experience of that as well, the thing that I felt really nourished by in those experiences have been people coming together in the space of questioning. Mm. It's sort of not like consensus building over shared values, but like I'm having this experience and I have questions about that and I'm trying to grow into whatever space is slightly beyond me at the moment and bringing collectives together to have those discussions. It's like the not sureness about who I'm growing into that seems to be the shared space that works well in a way. Yeah. Seba?
I have two instances or two situations that come to mind, and they're very different actually. So one of them is where my Advaita Vedanta teacher lives, and they have land in Portugal, and they're just living on the land, and they're just living in such beautiful harmony, and everyone who comes there is so welcome. And what I think is like the secret ingredient is the lack of individualization, so it's not about the individual at all actually, which is kind of like the opposite of what we were kind of touching upon, how in community you're able to flourish and be your unique self. It's not about that at all. It's kind of like no matter who you are, you have the same essence within you, and that's what I'm seeking when I look into your eyes. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm trying to connect with, and that is transformative. Really, I've never experienced people relating to each other just constantly like that. Just like everyone is welcome in the same way because you are exactly the same as I am. And I think that it's so unique. It's stunning. To just be immersed in that place. You just feel like, how could you ever relate to someone else in any other way? Actually, it just makes so much sense, and it's so natural and it's so easy. Actually, it kind of just like dissolves all the problems and all the insecurities and anything that would come up. And so that's a really, really successful community I've been lucky enough to be a part of. And the other one is here in Cairo with the Sufis. It's like the opposite. So I mean, we know everyone personally, So there's like a personal identity, you know, who did what and whose husband got sick and who, you know, things like that. And it's really messy and it's very emotional and but it's also, I mean, I don't know how deep it goes, maybe. Like it's quite deep in terms of like they meet often and their shared experiences and there's a lot of love and exchange. But it's not like profound change, you know, where you're really evolving and you're really feeling that kind of stuff. There is, you know, in terms of like with the teacher, you know, but like within the community, I don't feel like people are challenging each other in that way all the time. But it's really funny because one is very human and it's very enjoyable, and the other one is not human, but I mean it kind of transcends that, some of the aspects, you know, that we experience, you know, in our humanity, and it's also extremely successful. So I think those are the two ones that come to mind. Yeah.
It makes me think of, this, again, this contrast between, this otherworldly or, deeply spiritual experience and a very this worldly experience. Think about that in relation to my family sometimes. It's so easy to, for example, see the community that can come together very quickly over a moment of transformation in a training or something like that. And, people are there to plumb the depths of their capacity for awareness or, whatever it is. And that's like one type of experience. And then it's really easy to look at more like mundane, human, everyday interactions and feel that there's something missing there. But then the older I get, the more I also see the depth and value in just having shared life over a long period of time. When you can look back at your family or with the friends that you've had for a long time and realize that although some of those exchanges have been superficial and sometimes you've been close and other times you haven't and whatever, just the sheer volume of shared history has a different but real weight to it as well. So I actually think, Nat, that might be another good segue into some questions that I know that you had around sort of like yoga and community specifically.
Yeah, we've been touching on that throughout the conversation. So this is an opportunity to maybe just dive in a little bit more deeply. Maybe what we're seeing, but then also what we would like to see, like what we have a craving for, what we want to stand for in terms of community in yoga. And I can kind of piggyback off of the last question a little bit to just sort of share my own thoughts a little, and then I really want to hear what the two of you have to say as well. A community that I have seen work really well is the community that originates with the Himalayan Institute, coming from Swami Rama and then Panditji, and then that obviously informs Yoga Rupa, and then that really informs my teacher as well. And there's a specific set of tenets that the Himalayan tradition sort of adheres to, and I first read them when I was reading Living with the Himalayan Masters, which is Swami Rama's autobiography. And it's at the back of the book, so it's almost like an appendix. And it's just this list of like 20 some things that talk about like what values the Himalayan tradition really adheres to, and who they are and who they're not. And ultimately what it boils down to is there's one line that the rest of them seem to kind of flesh out, and it is love all, hate none, embrace all, exclude none. And that to me, like when I read that, I was like, sign me up. This is something that I want to be a part of, because it came coupled with a lot of structure, like the safety of a tradition, the safety of a lineage with really, really deep roots that was consciously embracing practitioners from all different styles of yoga, all different kinds of practices, just like the myriad. And it's not from a particular region, it's not a particular culture, it's not limited to a particular religion. It just is so much bigger than all of that, and coming together for this pursuit of, the end goal of, coming home to yourself and experiencing ultimate fulfillment and lasting freedom, as an individual, but then, coming together in community to help accomplish that. So that's, one thing that I wanted to point out. And then another that I thought was really interesting, kind of from your conversations, is something that, I took away from the Kundalini training that some of us did with Yoga Rupa earlier in the year, and the way that he talks about Kundalini as this. I mean, there are two quotes that he said that I immediately feverishly wrote down, which was, I have them here. Her acceptance is oceanic, universal is her embrace. Just that combination of those two things together. And then how he also was talking about how Kundalini essentially is the thing in all of us that is the same. So kind of touching on what you were saying, Seba, with your teacher in Portugal, that when you look into the eyes of another person, that you're looking to see the part of you that is the exact same as, the part that lives in them, and that it is exactly the same. And at the same time, the reason why creation is as diverse as it is because Kundalini has this desire to experience herself in the full spectrum of what's possible. So we're simultaneously incredibly unique and diverse because of Kundalini, and we're exactly the same because of Kundalini. And I just think that that's amazing. And it really resonates with me as a truth. And I think, so for me, I guess a community which can simultaneously support and encourage and foster those two things, would be a community that I would want to be a part of, and I would want to invest my time and energy into. So I'll open it up from there to see what you have a craving for in terms of community, what you would like to see, if there's anything that's like a non-negotiable, or I don't know, any thoughts or ideas that you have around that. And let's see, Chrissie, we keep coming to you first, so this time I'm going to go to Seba first. Any thoughts or ideas that you have, Seba, around what you want in community?
I mean, when you said non-negotiable, I thought like that. I was like, what's non-negotiable for me? And I think maybe, not maybe. I think something that is steeped in a full acknowledgement that there will be pain and perfection. There will be both. And because, and if the kind of like the foundation of the community acknowledges that within our existence at large, then I feel that it's very likely that it will also be accepted on an individual level. That there will be imperfections, and there will be all this kind of like, to accept all the distortions, and the versions of you, and also still to know that beauty does also exist, and you can grow and become, a radiant, luminous version of yourself as well. It's not just about holding you in your pain, but also challenging you to step up, when you do have that potential. So I think that would be non-negotiable for me, something that's really based on tolerance and acceptance of that, but really just a wide lens on what life is like, and what reality really is like, when it comes down to it, because it's not it's not just nice.
Yeah. It's not. How about you, Chrissie?
Yeah, I agree. I agree actually a lot with what Seba is saying, and I think about the moments where I've felt most held in community, and I think what it really speaks to for me is just this desire to connect. Just for the beauty of connection, without having any expectation of what that might look like or feel like. And it is this the Oceanic Embrace that you spoke of with Kundalini. It's about welcoming all of you in, all of everyone in, and that includes the encouragement then to embrace the messiness of life, to know that we'll be held in pain, and to be seen in all parts of ourselves, and that includes those bits that we probably wouldn't want to see of ourselves. But because when we can do that for others, we can do it also for ourselves. The things are reflected, and so yeah, for me, community is just, it is coming together to hold each other in everything that this human condition is, as well as encouraging us to seek beyond this and to know that there's something bigger, because those are the elements that allow me to find joy in all aspects of life, even those parts that hurt, to know that they're guiding me somewhere bigger. And so that's what I look for, and that's how I hope to show up too. When I'm holding space for people to come together, it's just to wrap my arms around them, metaphorically speaking, just as they are, and to allow them to come and to be whatever they need to be in that moment, and know that everything that they bring is welcome. And it's not always easy, because I think we can be so quick to step into judgment, and I've battled with that myself, actually, from stepping away from a community, and I had to sit with it, and I had to work at how could I embrace that, and to see that there's still work to do there for myself. But I think when we can really do that, then there's a sense of deep rooted community that can last.
How about you, Karina?
The thing that I was just thinking about, and I think it, is also a reflection of what you were saying about Kundalini, which I loved, is that, even in having a conversation about community, which, in some sense, there's contained within it this implicit sense of searching for an answer, or searching for a resolution, or, something like that. Actually, what I would seek in a community is almost like the imperfection of it. That idea that, the challenge that you're facing is not an obstacle to the path, it is the path. Mm. And so, in seeing an issue arise in a community, it's not an obstacle to community, it is community. And to have community where maybe that's the shared ideal, that it's a space inside which we all have a commitment to not turning away from moments of mess or friction or imperfection or messing up, but there's a collective understanding that is community in action, and that is the thing that makes community wonderful. Yeah, that's what came up for me.
That to me, I think that's very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for me as a recovering perfectionist, the idea that I would seek that out, I'm like, look at you growing. But I think that also speaks to the this idea that Kundalini is it's everything and all expressions of things. There's an element of continuity or sameness there, but there's an element of just absolute diversity there, and I love that the mess of trying to figure it out is actually the thing that lies at its heart.
Yeah. It's really similar to the qualities that I was looking for in a husband. Somebody who will love and adore me unconditionally, like in my brattiest, most petulant moments, he will still love me and support me unconditionally, but who also has the courage and the tenacity to point out when I'm being a brat or when I'm being irresponsible or all of those things that I don't really want to be, but that I'm very comfortable being until someone is able to stand up to me a little bit. Um, and then to hold my hand as I endeavor to grow, and who is also capable of growing themselves, capable and invested in growing. And like that to me is like a marriage relationship that I could, convince myself was worthy of a lifetime commitment. And I think it's the same stuff I'm looking for in friendship. And to me, community is like an extension of friendship as well, of like loving each other no matter what. But that doesn't always mean coddling. Maybe it never means coddling, but holding each other accountable, but in a way like I'm not going to turn my back on you through this process. I'm going to maybe highlight an opportunity for growth. Take it or leave it. And then if you decide you want to grapple with it, I'm here for you. And I'm going to stay right here for you and let you, figure yourself out, and then we'll grow together through the process. I think that's like, I'm getting like teary just thinking about that. So I think that is like a genuine longing of being seen, being heard, in fullness, and then seeing and hearing someone else in fullness, and then like making that tenacious, like, I'm here for this. I'm not running away from any aspect of this, no matter what. That kind of a thing feels really good.
So I feel like that is a nice place to wrap things up. So I might just finish with one more question, which is basically the question I always finish things with. I'm going to be utterly predictable. Which is there anything that we haven't asked or made space for in this conversation that feels important to bring up before we close it out? Anybody? I won't direct this.
I think I'm just reminded of something I read this morning about the difference between comfort and nurturance. How comfort can be a piece of chocolate and nurturance can be pumpkin ginger soup. And it's not that one is better than the other, but you need to just be realistic about the difference, And I feel like I guess maybe we have talked about this, but yeah, I think that distinction is really conducive to growth. Just what is it that's really nourishing and nurturing, as opposed to just making you feel good.
Nat, you?
I think everything that you are saying is right on with what I'm looking for, what I'm hoping to create and cultivate for others as well. There's a sutra, I always forget which one it is, but I reference it like all the time. And it's in Panditji's commentary on it, where he talks about how we're almost hardwired as human beings to err toward competition rather than collaboration. But that competition can be healthy to trigger growth on occasion, but that collaboration, like conscious collaboration, is where a lot of that like really good fodder for growth emerges. And that has just sat with me and prompted me to want to seek out opportunities for collaboration. And that, I mean, like this podcast is a prime example of that, of, finding someone that I know I like already and have a tremendous amount of respect for, but who I also think has the full capacity to challenge me to grow, and then bringing, together our different strengths or whatnot and creating this collaboration that then can potentially be a nucleus for community to spring up. So that's one aspect of it. And then another that I've just sort of touched on recently as like a really significant part of my own personal dharma is this notion that together we rise. And so that idea of like individuals doing the work on their own, but then coming together, supporting one another, uplifting one another, challenging one another, and then in that sort of circle of community, rising together. Yeah. And I personally want to express my gratitude to all three of you for your willingness to show up and talk about stuff and share what matters to you and what you've seen and what you'd like to see. And I genuinely hope that this is something we can continue to nurture, and will grow, and then together we can all grow.
Yes, I second that. My gratitude to you as well. May there long be both pumpkin and ginger soup and chocolate. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.